This episode is brought to you by Optus. Modern work happens everywhere, and businesses need to deliver seamless digital experiences without compromising security. Smart organisations are building security into the device and the connection, giving employees frictionless access wherever they're working, while the business gains visibility, control, and resilience. Talk to Optus today about our managed mobility solutions. Hello and welcome to the IT News podcast. Our guest this fortnight is the Executive General Manager of Technology and Data at carsales, Michelle Lowe. Carsales has long been data-driven, but increasingly they're seeking to connect with prospective car buyers from inside of AI chat apps and ecosystems, which are proving influential in the car buying experience. They're also putting more data into the hands of car dealers and manufacturers to help them understand what is selling and why. As the EGM of Tech and Data, can you introduce us to what that function or domain looks like and what Tech and Data at carsales covers?
Yeah, look, it's a pretty diverse role and team that I look after, so very privileged. My team sit across product, platform engineering, data, AI, core applications, enterprise tech functions, so it's quite a diverse group. The long and short of it is that me and my teams are responsible for everything the customer sees and interacts with on our platform. So if you're familiar with the carsales app or our platform, if they're searching or they're using in-app messaging, I have the teams that build the products that people actually interact with. I also have the teams that have the smart engines and the infrastructure that sit behind that look to optimize the seamlessness of those experiences and the data that sits in it all. So it's quite a diverse group. I think I like best in this role, seeing the connectivity across all the different areas. You get to see how a decision in one area, and that might be something our AI team is doing with a recommendation engine, how that flows on to something the customer experiences in terms of a personalized interaction, in terms of how they might be searching for products. So being able to see that connectivity across teams and to get them pulling in the same direction is something I really enjoy about this role. And really important for us because we're getting into the next chapter, what it means to be AI native. So having teams that collectively work to a purpose is pretty important for that.
And how big is Tech and Data as a function or domain?
We're constantly changing. I think we're sat at about 150 to 200 folks, depending on where we're looking at our contractor partnering groups as well. But at any one point in time, we look at what's needed to deliver and we do shape our workforce to that.
And what's the split between product versus the infrastructure and behind the scenes on the tech side? Are most of the teams working on the front-facing stuff?
I'd say it's 50-50. I think it really depends. If we were to look holistically at something a customer touches, the end-to-end of it is quite well spread across all teams. We're just looking at teams shipping features. You might go, it's about 50-50. But then when you kind of realize that you need the AI in the back, you need the data pipelines, you need, in some cases, specialized infrastructure to support it, then in that sense, there's no product someone touches that almost a whole lot of them aren't working on. So yeah, it just depends on what angle you look at it through.
You mentioned the importance of the connectivity of the teams and the team structures and of being committed to a single purpose. Is there a single purpose or like a set of core principles that carsales runs on in terms of business strategy that translates into defining the purpose of the tech teams as well?
Obviously, we have functions that specialize in the areas they work in. But I think when we think about things from a strategic approach, it's really about choices, whether it's AI or emerging technology. That in and of itself is not a strategy because there's kind of no real alternative if you're not actually thinking about how to use the best in breed tech to serve our customers. Then we're really not doing our jobs. But the tech and data strategy, which is quite unified, is ultimately about choosing the moments that matter to focus on for building capability that makes it easier and smarter for customers buying and selling vehicles. So I probably can't get into all the specific about all the choices we make, but I think to give you a couple of examples to make that concrete, you may have seen voice search that we put out in recent times. That's quite deliberate in streamlining what we consider quite an important part of experience around searching for vehicles, which is normally quite big and open-ended. It's a moment that matters for our customers. The voice search capability is about making that simpler and easier for what can be quite nebulous for customers at the outset. Different example, but same principle. Things we're doing in the dealer space around making market intelligence available to dealers that help in sourcing and pricing type decisions. Again, those are moments that matter for our B2B customers, for running their businesses. Well, we put a lot of time and effort into focusing on the intelligence capabilities that help in what we consider quite critical workflows for them. So the guiding principle really is, where are those moments that matter? Where can we bring capability that really help make those experiences easier and smarter? I'd say something that's not always obvious is that it's a lot harder to make something easy than it is to make something smart. And a lot of AI experiences get that backwards. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do you insert smart technologies into an experience such that it's easy, intuitive, as safe and as trustworthy as a customer expects it to be, without having to worry about the smarts that make it so. And that's a big part of what guides how we go about making those choices.
So you talked about moments that matter there. How do you
Yeah.
actually work out or determine or prioritize, in terms of the work that tech and data carries out, which moments that matter and which ones to address?
We're marketplace, right? So we serve customers both in the consumer and the B2B space. Ultimately, it is about impact and where a capability we might bring to a customer moves the needle impactfully for the customer. Within consumer, we're very heavy on experimentation because we serve consumers all over Australia. A big part of that is understanding how their behaviors can be assisted through the buying, selling process. So experimentation to identify where the pain points are, where we think if we pushed out a new feature that could help reduce some friction, do we see the improvements we expect to see? We are quite disciplined about experimenting and learning in a fast feedback way from our consumers as to discovering where those most impactful parts of the experience are. From a B2B customer perspective, we work with dealers, manufacturers, service providers, and a lot of that work is in co-designing and in the go-to-market motion in terms of discovering where those pain points are. We've had really deep relationships with our B2B customers for a long time. So a lot of how we think about product development goes beyond, I think, thesis and where we think the pain points are, but actually co-thinking, co-designing, soliciting answers from them as to where their problems are. And we find that when we co-design for the pain points, it's much better strike rate on being able to solve problems meaningfully for them. So horses for courses, I suppose. The whole job ultimately is to be able to bring impactful solutions and meeting customers where they're at.
How much freedom do the software engineering teams have, for example, to be able to create different solutions that might be able to solve a problem and then get it into a position where it can be more broadly adopted? Or is everything governed more at a strategic level and you'll basically have a funnel of ideas and you're able to prioritize and distribute out to those teams which ones that you're going to work on at any one particular time?
It's a bit of both. I think we always have a strategic direction around what we're hearing from customers at the senior levels and across our go-to-market sales and product and even engineering leadership. We're all quite deeply immersed in the customer conversation, so we've got a good sense of where the problem spaces are. We really try and couple that with a bottom-up experimentation muscle. One of the things people like best about working here is that no idea is too small. And quite often, out of a direction of travel, you'll get a team member that has an extension of the idea or starts thinking about a problem differently and bubbles that up. And an example of this, I mentioned market intelligence before. That's one area that has come up. From a market intelligence perspective, just to share some context, we've worked with data a long time with our B2B customers. A big part of how we help them with data has always been about helping them understand things like inventory performance on our site, what vehicles are selling, what they might need to do to optimize performance of their other vehicles, how do you move slow stock, things like that. And those sorts of insights we've been doing a long time. We've been data-driven for a long time, but by and large, the work has focused in the account management and the sales activity of how we do business with our B2B customers. But we've had team on the ground come to a realization that, hey, it would be even better if this kind of intelligence wasn't just delivered through our account channels. It'd be great if it just sat in our AutoGate SaaS platform, which is the platform our B2B customers use. And they can access it while they are doing sourcing or while they are doing some market research analysis, right? So that then became the genesis for actually something we put out, I think, in the last 6 months. We call it Insights AI internally, but what it essentially is an insights engine that dealers can access if they subscribe to it to ask questions conversationally about what market dynamics are going on with their inventory. And so that's an example of the two-speed thing in motion where from a product development perspective, we have that macro view. We're often thinking about how do you actually build product in line with where our customers might be going. But then out of that activity, you get the team that goes, hey, we could solve this differently. How do you bubble that out, get that fed into the roadmap? And that's worked really well for us.
Is Insights AI, that engine built internally or are you leveraging some sort of external models?
It's built internally. It's obviously built off the back of a lot of data we have on what's performing in our marketplace. We're cloud native, so built off AWS infrastructure and architected to leverage what's available within cloud infrastructure from a compute and AI engine perspective, but overlaid with our data. A lot of what's, I guess, been put into it and the thought around it was, how do you surface what's relevant? Because quite often with insights or intelligence, having a lot of data is not the problem. It's surfacing the right kind of information that is relevant to the questions that are being asked. So the dealer's interested in what's selling or what inventory is moving in market. When they ask a question, they're actually interested in what's moving within this segment, not just what's moving in all of Australia. So the sort of thought that we put into it is actually, how do you answer the questions as it is meaningful to the person with that data? And it's a lot built around surfacing the right insights as opposed to all the data itself. That's probably the bulk of thinking that went into that feature set.
Just wondering, because obviously you started your role at carsales purely in the data domain before branching out into the product and infrastructure side as well. Can you maybe just talk about how the data domain has changed or evolved in your time at the organization?
One of the reasons I joined carsales and still love working here is it's one of those rare businesses that actually bakes data and intelligence built on data into our products. So we genuinely actually build our products with data and treat our data as an asset. That's not changed. It continues to be part of the DNA of this place. I think the step change for me, and I have the great privilege in the role now sitting across tech and data, my focus has been shortening the distance between where data has been produced and where it actually creates value. It's quite often two different parts of the business, because the teams that might be building the products, for example, that help a customer, let's say, research a car on the editorial part of our site, they might not be the same teams that are thinking about how to take that intent and help them maybe find a vehicle on the search part of our site. So there is a distance inherently in where data is produced and where its value can be unlocked. And quite often, to bridge that gap, the key focus really has been trying to build into the teams an operating range that goes beyond, I think, answering questions with data. It's one thing where the teams go, oh, let's pull this data to answer this question about how someone's using a feature. It's a totally different thing to, I think, build into the teams the mindset as to, hey, I look after this part of the experience. How does my work here around editorials actually produce really useful data that could be helpful to a customer elsewhere, right? So how do you help our teams not just use data to answer questions, but to actually anticipate the right questions in the first place about how our data can be used to help our customers? So the Dealer Insights products I mentioned is an example of that, where it used to be that let's get the BI team to pull some reports and bring that to market. We now actively think about how do you actually make that part of the dealer experience. And we've got similar analogs in the consumer space as well, where we've got people that are on the site searching and browsing for vehicles all the time. How do we, knowing that they've looked at something, help guide them towards a decision that makes sense for them, given the signal we're getting from customers on the site? That's probably been the main step change we've been introducing into our teams. Having both tech and data sit in my area gives me the ability to have conversations to pull teams in the same direction. And I guess the beauty with where AI is at as well is this, we can close this data to value distance pretty much anywhere in the buy-sell experience. So that's been pretty exciting to work on.
Is there like an enterprise data platform that sits behind this and underpins it in terms of reducing that distance between the data owner or the data producer and that data consumer?
We do have a few platforms. We have Snowflake from a warehousing perspective. We do have the CDP within our media landscape, and we've got some platforms within the Google space as well. We spend a lot more time thinking about transport and architecture beyond the platform alone. The platforms serve a purpose for accelerating parts of how you move data around or store them. So I think we spend a lot more time thinking about what's the problem we have at hand for a given situation and how do we assemble the componentry across the tools we've got. So while there is, I think, some enterprise platforms that we anchor on and keep reference principles, we're really pragmatic in anticipating that as customers' needs change, we're always going to need to be adapting how we architect across these platforms to service those needs.
And you mentioned in the last bit as well that AI has a role in reducing that distance as well. Do you want to just explain that a little bit more?
Maybe a good example is ChatGPT apps. We recently built into the ChatGPT app ecosystem. That was quite deliberate and quite intentional. I think the core of it is AI presents ways to rethink entirely how do you solve for high friction experience points. So next to buying a home, buying a car is probably the highest consideration decision people can make. It's financial, it is quite complex, it's emotional. And a lot of the complexity in that is the distance between information someone wants and where it's actually produced. The beauty of AI is you can actually rethink what a high friction point could look like. ChatGPT, for instance, lets us tap into emerging behaviors around how people do research. And it was important to be where they're at to offer the assistance to the people who might have been on that platform already starting to think about their next purchase. So you kind of do a compare contrast. Historically, someone's buying a car, they might have needed to come onto the car sales website. You don't know where to start when you're searching. You might have a go at just trying something on the homepage. Being on ChatGPT where someone's starting a conversation means we can offer them the tooling that makes sense for where they're at in that conversation and help streamline that process a great deal and meet them where they might be. Some people know what they're looking for. They get straight on the comparisons. Some people don't know what they don't know. And, meeting them where we're at becomes quite key. So I think that's the thing with AI. It affords us the means to solve these high friction or complex parts of the experience completely differently than what we traditionally might have been used to in building web applications and traditional interfaces alone.
What's your experience with the conversion rate in terms of bringing customers from a chat application towards car sales where they're able to potentially complete a purchase, for example?
Anecdotally, can share a little bit about is that we certainly see from our recent research, we've got an automotive consumer research offering, and some of the latest findings have been that AI, I think certainly not limited to ChatGPT, but similar type of tooling, it's featured, I think for the first time is one of the top 10 influencers on consideration. And we do see the behaviors for people coming onto the site. We're seeing much higher intent in terms of people that have come on from those interfaces. We're also seeing in that research that people, if anything, are better informed as to what they can get out of a trusted transactional marketplace like car sales. So without giving too much away, I will say it's been positive. It continues to evolve, but we're pretty excited at what we're seeing so far.
As you say, you've got to go where the consumer is, and it just becomes more and more fragmented across the internet generally. So it just means you've got to be in more places.
Yeah, I think meeting consumers where they're at is not new to us. We've got quite a diverse set of platforms. So we're on the web, but apps are pretty heavy activity places. So that's always been, I think, in the DNA of how we think about meeting the consumer. AI provides us a new way of thinking or expanding that thought process about what that looks like. And so far, it's been really good to be part of seeing how our consumers' behaviors are changing.
Maybe just if you can give me a little bit of a sense of how you see AI evolving the customer experience or driving changes in the way you reach buyers over the next 12 months. Is it more of this focus on going to the AI chat services themselves, or is there other stuff that's happening or in your mindset or thinking?
I think in terms of how car sales reaches consumers, I'm quite excited about how we're set up to do that. Realistically, we're strong views about how experiences with AI can look quite different. We're also keeping that practical mindset. A big part of how we're thinking about innovation is the work we're doing with Car Group. You might have seen the group set up CG Lab, which is our agentic innovation hub that's based in Brazil. Their mandate, which we're working quite closely with them on, is to develop agentic capabilities once and deploy them across our marketplaces globally. So that's definitely here in Australia, as well as Webmotors in Brazil, our business trader and active in North America. We've got Encar in Korea and, of course, Chile Autos in Chile. A lot of the work we're doing is collaborating with CG Labs on things like conversational capabilities, to my earlier point about reimagining how certain high-friction things can change. So we're quite excited about what that means for reducing the time to solving customer problems, because that's going to get shorter if we're able to incubate these capabilities and deploy that across our markets. And I think a big part of where we'll see that take shape, at least within the Australian experience, when you look across what we have put out so far, voice, we've looked at conversational aspects of voice, we've looked at conversational experiences within the dealer landscape. A big part of this is, I mentioned before, reducing friction points. The reason we've done conversational in a few parts is that that's one key way we rethink taking out friction. The other piece to it is how do you do that safely and responsibly, being thoughtful about shipping these sorts of new experiences in ways that isn't just about helping the customer, but actually while we're doing that, just builds on the trust and confidence we've given them over the years on that experience. So for us, it's going to be those anchoring principles. We're not wedded to how that looks as the tech evolves. That might open up new opportunities as well that we haven't anticipated now. But I think the next 12 months is going to be pretty exciting to prove out some of how these experiences actually play out.
That's the episode for this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode, and for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to itnews.com.au.